Perfect. Perfect. All right. So many of you already met me on the bus. My name is Rostin Wu. I'm part of the team that's working on this project along with Joel Garcia and Robin Garcia. There are several people here who are part of the working circle that we mentioned before. Working circle members, would you raise your hand so people can see you and say hi? So you can note that. And I just want to welcome you all. Thank you so much for making the time to be out here today. I'm going to introduce Bob Ramirez to come up and tell us about this place.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Kuruvungna. Who's been here before? Okay, well, that's good.
You've got to speak right into the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Very good. Welcome to Kuruvungna. This is a very special sacred place. It's a historical site, state historical landmark. It's an archaeological site. It's registered with the Native American Heritage Commission as a sacred site because of the presence for thousands of years of the indigenous native people that lived here. In 1769, August 4th, 1769, Father Juan Crespi and the Portola expedition arrived very close to where we're standing. I don't know the exact area. And I'll read his account. As we arrived and set up camp, six very friendly, compliant, tractable heathens, now that's translated from Spanish. What he meant were Gentiles or non-Christians, but tractable, meaning friendly, who had their little houses roofed with grass, the first we have seen of this sort. 3 of them came wearing a great deal of paint, all of them, however, unarmed. They brought 4 or 6 bowls of usual seeds and good sage, which they bestowed and presented to our captain. On me, they bestowed a good-sized string of sorted beads that they all had made of white seashells and red ones, though not very bright colored, that looked to be coral, though of very inferior sort. Crespi named the springs, this is not his guide, they named the springs San Gregorio while visiting the Tongva village at the springs with the Portola expedition. What happened was they were told by the natives here to continue up Sepulveda Pass because they wanted to go up the coast. They said, you're not going to make it, it's pretty rough. They went through the Sepulveda Pass, and the soldiers that came here eventually made it up to see San Francisco Bay. When they came back, they gathered up the natives and brought them to San Gabriel, most of them. San Gabriel mission. They were compelled to build the mission, become Catholics, and that was the beginning of the end of the societies that lived in these villages here. The reason why people have been here for thousands of years is because of the springs that you'll get to see. Right up here, there's one remaining spring. Of all the springs that were once littered along the foothills of the Santa Monica Range, this is the last one that has not been covered, paved over. There's another spring on the school campus, and those 2 springs reminded the Spanish of the tears of Saint Monica, who was the mother of Augustine, and when he was a young boy, he would get in trouble, and so she cried quite a bit, and she was famous for her tears. So they named these after Las Lágrimas de Santa Monica. And later, when Sepulveda was given the land by the Mexican Revolutionary Government, it was sold to Colonel Baker, Senator Jones, who founded the city of Santa Monica. This was the water supply. We have a map in that museum that shows the water line going from the springs to a little reservoir that's down in the athletic field, and with the pipe that went all the way around to where Wilshire and 25th is now. I think it's Douglas Park. You see that water feature there? That was part of the waterworks. So this was the water supply for our city of Santa Monica. And these springs gave the name to the city, the mountain range, the bay, the freeway, the liquor store, everything. It's a very, very historic place. The land was purchased in 1900 by the LAUSD. And there was 22 acres, 6 city blocks. The springs were part of that land parcel. So this is actually state land. It's owned by the LAUSD. This 2-acre section has been fenced off to protect the site. And The foundation that was created 30 years ago, the Gabrieleño Tonga Springs Foundation, has an agreement with LAUSD. We pay $1 a year for the use of the site, and we maintain it. So all the work that you see that has been done, all the native plants, the maintenance of the pond, it's all done with volunteer labor with our foundation. So if you'd like to donate, there's ways to do that. You can go online. We have a web page. We have PayPal. We take checks, Bitcoin, Rolexes. No, just kidding. The reason why I thought it was important, because I know we're talking about the mural at Santa Monica City Hall. And I live in Santa Monica. I do business there. I'm familiar with the mural. We all have different thoughts on it, but I thought it would really be important to visit the place where this event that's depicted actually occurred, and to try to understand, after reading this and visiting this place, we may have a different way of interpreting that mural and discussing how we can explain to the kids the attitudes of the 1938 versus the way we think about it ourselves and each other today, how we treat other people, how we depict other people. But that's a bigger discussion. Any questions? Because I know we have a limited amount of time. Any questions about Kuruvungna and the springs in this location? Yes, sir.
A question. Is that a new spring over there?
That,
The corner
what
by
you see over there, many years ago, there was a task force that made recommendations. How do we use the spring water? This spring that you see here, this pool, that water coming up, produces 56,000 gallons a day of fresh water. It goes through these ornamental concrete ponds built in the 30s, surrounded by magnificent exotic trees. They were probably 70, 80 years old, and it flows into the storm drain, down Stoner, and out to the ocean. So we were always trying to figure out a way to use some of this water for irrigation. We found a solar-powered company that makes solar-powered water pumps, so we put in a line from the spring all the way to a box there, so we can now pump about 360 gallons of water using the energy of the sun. So that little pool that you see there is just recirculating water, fresh from the spring through that pool, and it flows back into here. We use that water for irrigation for the agricultural quadrant, which is in that back corner. We decided to turn that into a garden when we heard that the school had plans to turn that into a parking lot. Like, we need more parking lots. So we brought the water there, planted the Mesoamerican garden in that corner. We used the water to irrigate the natives to get them started in the sacred medicine garden. You're welcome to visit that in that corner. And then around the key is that the grass thatched structure that he described. Well, we have one right here, traditionally made out of limbs from the site, thatched with the tule, which is the giant reed we got at Bayona Freshwater Marsh. We have some growing here as well. And all around this key are planted native plants. We collaborate with the Theodore Payne Foundation. And we recently, a month ago, just before the big rains, planted this whole area near the fence with native plants. And they're kind of small now, but come back in 20 years. Bring your kids. So that's what that water is up there. It's natural, fresh spring water. By the way, we have the water tested with scientists and hydrologists. And it turns out this water is actually cleaner than the tap water you're going to drink. This tap water has all kinds of stuff they put in. This water is pristine. So you can taste it if you want on your way through. You can take a little sip. It's easier to just dip your hand in there if you'd like to experience the medicinal qualities of fresh water. Yes?
The springs that are up on the campus over there in that little wall, are they unplugged? I remember some years back they had plugged it up for some reason. What's the status on that right now?
About 15 years ago they did water testing and they found some contaminants on the spring on the other side of the fence there in the school grounds. It might have been from a janitor that spilled something, or it could have been from a dry cleaners on Wilshire. So they did find some contaminants. So they're monitoring both these springs. There is a plume, they think, of contaminants that end of the school. And so that's why they were nervous, even though the parts per billion are so low, that's not going to hurt you. But out of an abundance of caution, and because they're run by lawyers and they want to protect the world, they took the waterfall and put a pipe and put it right into the storm drain. So we can no longer visit that. And one of our goals as running Kuruvungna is to teach them about the water, let them try to daylight it again so that the students can enjoy it. Because I think that from people that went to Uni High in the past have really fond memories of the springs, and they're kind of astonished how things have changed. We had the class of 1956. They had their reunion here last spring. And they said when they were here, there were no fences. They could just walk from their home right to classroom. So things have changed, but we are dedicated to restoring the site, bringing in the natives, not just the native plants, but native creatures. And if you're lucky, you'll be able to glimpse in this pool a school of minnows. They're the native arroyo chub that are threatened and endangered because of loss of habitat in the LA area, but they're native to this region. We reintroduce them and they're thriving. You'll see a big school of them flitting about. We've also brought back tree frogs, the American toad. There's 30 different kinds of birds that live in this area. You'll see red-tailed hawks, Cooper's hawks, owls. It's a very special place, and I'm sure you can kind of feel the magic and the power of this place. It's healing. We have water that's flowing perennially through here, and you can probably feel the antiquity and the great, the profound aspect of the space. Yes?
Yeah. Does this thing come from the mountain or just it's from here?
It comes from the rains that land on the Santa Monica mountain range. They go underground and they slowly migrate down. Some of the water might be 100 years old. It could be blended with other water. But it's all originating in the mountains up behind us. And what happens is it hits an earthquake fault that runs right through the school campus. In fact, they had to tear down a building because they discovered it was right on the fault. It runs from Point Dume to Hollywood. And it's this fault that runs at the base of the Santa Monica Mountains. It runs right, if you stand at the springs and you look uphill, that hill is 30 feet higher, right behind the springs, because we're on a fault that has caused the water to migrate to the surface. Yes, Nina.
Hi, Robert. Could you talk a little bit more about the context of the meeting that you described? Because it sounds like the native people were waiting for the expedition and that it was ceremonial in some way. Is there more that you could tell us about that event?
Well, from what I understand, I've read the Crespi diaries, and I've also read Costanzo, who was the engineer. He wrote an account of this expedition, and it's I don't know if they were expecting, but probably they heard about these travelers that were coming through here, and as is our custom, we're very welcoming and very friendly and giving, and of course if anybody comes and they're thirsty, well, we're going to give them sage and water and welcome them, because that is the kind of culture that is native to California. I think, the problem with that is everything got taken away. So that the actual people that lived here, we would call them Kuruvungnavits, people of Kuruvungna. If you were from Topanga, you're a Topungnavit, or if you were from Cahuenga or Tahunga. We didn't call ourselves Tongva or Quiche or Gabrieleños. Those words came in later. It was really, you were identified by your village. And there was a lot of movement and trade and connections with the Chumash and the Cahuilla and the Serrano. But when the Spanish came, everything changed. They brought in their animals that ate away all the native grasses, the plants. It was a catastrophe for the people for the lifestyle that was here before. And it took several hundred years for the Spanish Empire to make it from Veracruz in Mexico City to this part of the world. This was neglected for hundreds of years because it's so hard to get to California. It's very difficult to sail up the coast, hard to cross the deserts. So the Spanish kind of ignored it for hundreds of years until the Russians started to come down from Alaska. They invaded California. The first Europeans to invade, I don't know about these people, but I don't want to offend anybody, but maybe it's really cold in Moscow. It's really warm. But they built a fort called Fort Ross, and it's still there, and it's a really interesting place to visit. They were master woodworkers, and the Spanish were alarmed, and that's when they decided to send Portola on his expedition to claim it for the Spanish. And what's fascinating is if you've ever been up to, there's Sebastopol, the Russian River, but in Sonoma, you'll find the northernmost Spanish mission, the northernmost final mission, almost across the street from the southernmost Russian Orthodox Church. So Moscow and Madrid collided in Sonoma. Then later, when the Americans came in 1848, we don't want to go too much into detail, but it was a terrifying, horrible time for the Native Americans in California. There's things that we are not taught in school. I was not taught, but there's books that you can read, and it was a pretty horrible genocide, I would say, that's the word, of the Native Californians. The Mission Indians had suffered a different fate because we were Christianized and urbanized here in LA. As a consequence, the Gabrieleños is a word that means you belong to the mission of San Gabriel. If you were sent to San Fernando, you're a Fernandino. Or a Chumash to Santa Barbara, you're a Barbareño. You belong to the mission. So the descendants of the natives are called Gabrieleños. And as a result of urbanization and conquest and missing treaties and deception and theft, genocide, the Gabrieleños were left with no land at all to call their own, dispersed through the urban part of LA. Some of the Chumash were able to maintain some land. Some of the other nations further south have little rancherias, and so they became federally recognized tribes, which allowed them to have gaming casinos, and that's a whole other story. But the Gabrieleños, this really represents one of the few pieces of land that we can call our own, even though it's owned by the state. But we do feel, as caretakers of the land, a responsibility and a duty to protect this place, and also to share it with everybody, because I think we all need to be connected to history, to our past. That's why Ruth Ann is here with the Conservancy, because we do respect the past. We want to tell the story of the past in a way that benefits the future. So I think we're all here because of the mural, which does depict this meeting here at the site. We show the horse, Portola's horse, in the water where the natives are drinking from. There's many different versions of how you want to interpret this, but so this would probably represent, although it says Junipero Serra, he was not here on this voice. This is probably Father Juan Crespi. And this gentleman is dressed in a 16th century outfit, so we don't really know if he represents, somebody said Cabrillo, but I kind of think it could be Juan Yorba, one of my ancestors, because that's the complexity here. We have ancestors from all over, and he was a Catalan volunteer that passed through here and then became wealthy in the San Gabriel Valley, created a town called Yorba Linda, and that's the name of one of my ancestors, so it's all mixed up. This, I suppose, represents Portola on his white steed, and what I see, just casually looking at it, he's got a foot in the water that the natives are drinking from, and they're down on their haunches, I suppose. And what strikes me about this most is that they're completely disengaged. There is no meeting. Here they describe a meeting with tractable, friendly people, and yet here there's no recognition that there's humans down here. So when I take my kids through City Hall, we kind of look at that and I go, yeah, this is how people thought back then. So the man that did this in 1938, this was at a time during the WPA, it was Jim Crow era. Maybe we had different attitudes about the races. And there's a lot of notions that history began on this date. And maybe it did, written history began. But you fail to acknowledge that for thousands of years, people had lived here. And they didn't just look like this, naked, faceless, without eyes, wearing a loincloth. I think it was a much more sophisticated, and you could tell a much better story and envelop and talk about their humanity, because that's what I see personally. We all have our different ideas, and I know Ruth and I have had many conversations, but that's not for me. I'm just giving you my own personal opinion. And, any other questions about? So this would be the springs, I would imagine. this waterway here. We could walk up and look at the source, if you guys are interested. Shall we do that?
Yeah.
Let's go up here and just go around the spring that you'll see up here, and we can take a moment and honor the ancestors.
Let's even listen to each other to figure out what their perspective is.
Well, you know, in some of my house,
Need I say more?
I have another.
So this is groundwater bubbling up?
This is groundwater. At a certain angle, you can see it. If you move around, the sun's not hitting the surface. When the water settles, you'll see a sand bottom with water boiling up through that sandy bottom. And it's coming from the aquifer. There's quite a lot of rain at the time. If you look at the map, there's not much going on. There's no industry, there's no institutions, there's some homes, but mostly it's wild chaparral. And you know that rain that we had last month? It dumps a lot more in the mountains than it does right here. We had a couple of inches, it just flew with the rapids, but we probably get 6-7 inches as that system hits the slope. And it migrates down through the aquifer and eventually hits an impermeable rock layer down below us where we're standing because of the earthquake fault, and the water is, of course, at the surface. You can see it actually bubbling up through here. And it flows through this little pipe right here into that pool, which nourishes the giant ahuehuete, which is the Montezuma cypress. That tree is exotic in the country of Mexico. It's the largest tree of its kind in the state of California. It's the champion. Even though it's not native, it is part of Kuruvungna. It's at least 70 years old. I don't think the Spanish planted it, that's one story. They would plant these at the waterways because they live in the water, so you can always tell where there's a spring if you find that tree and there's water nearby. But the school in the 50s planted lots of exotics. This was their agricultural classroom. They had greenhouses over here. I believe, looking at the records, and Nina Fresco knows a lot about this. She's done a lot of research on this site, and we have seen aerial photos of this site from the 30s, I believe. None of this was here. Just, you know, the water has always been here for thousands of years, but it probably didn't have this ring around it. And almost all these trees were brought in. They were considered, this was a conservancy, botanical conservancy. So these are native oaks that you see behind. This one, this one, this one. These are Quercus agrifolia. These are very important. They would provide acorns and habitat, and they get massive. This log bench here is from a 200-year-old Quercus agrifolia, post-live oak, that fell in Santa Clarita Valley and was donated by Angel City Lumber. And on the outside of the building, you see this big round, it's a section of an oak tree, 400-year-old oak tree from Beverly Hills. And we like to hang that on the building as part of our outdoor museum. And you know how in Yosemite they have the sections of the logs showing when Jesus was born? So here we'll have, this is when Portola came, this is when the Mexicans came, and this is, so you can tell history, because we want to educate all of us. You know, we're all educable. Kids especially, we have a lot of students from Uni High, UCLA. So this is a unique site, it's a cultural treasure. And there's nothing like it that I've ever seen. Right here, surrounded by skyscrapers and buildings, to step back into antiquity in a historic site that is depicted maybe a little unfairly by this guy that did this art in 1938. So I'm glad the art community is going to help us and talk about how we're going to move forward with the interpretation of that. But I think it's so wonderful that we could all be here and experience this water, this land, this site, and this spot where this happened. And it's connecting this to history in the past. And in the future, all our kids are going to be able to come and enjoy the work that we're putting in here. Because as I said, we're restoring the site with bringing in all native plants, pretty much, and adding our native creatures and our friends and natives and the entire community who's welcome here at Kuruvungna. We are open to the public the first Saturday of every month, so anybody can come. And if special requests for educational tours, you can contact me through the webpage, and I'll do the best I can. I have a day job, but I do feel very obligated to protect this place and share it as long as I can.
What are the hours on Saturday?
From 10 to 3, the first Saturday of the month. First Saturday. If you want to come and work and you see the gates open on other Saturdays and you have your gloves and you want to come pick some weeds, you're all welcome to come and help out. Because that's really what Kuruvungna means. They say it means place where we are in the sun, but I think it means grab a rake. Yeah. Are there any other questions or yes?
What are the hours of the museum?
Once again, it would be from 10 to 3 on the first Saturday.
For Saturday, 10 to 3. Thank you.
Can you just tell us again how we can give money?
Well, you can go through your wallet and your purse right now, pull out cash. That's one way. You can write a check and send it to the foundation. We have a web page. It's easy to find. You can look at Kuruvungna Springs, or if you Google Kuruvungna, you'll reach our web page. We have PayPal, so you can just go to PayPal, donate money, and we appreciate all donations. Because like I said, we have no paid staff, it's all volunteer labor, and it helps us tremendously to feel the support of the community. So, yes.
Can you touch, you touched a little bit on this, but can you touch a little bit more on the sacredness of the site and what water would have meant and the source of water?
I mean,
it's obvious, but
we don't think about it because we go and turn on the tap and have a shower and get a cold drink. But if you go back to your ancestors 250 years ago, water, and it's still to this day, is the most sacred element there is. You cannot live without water very long at all. If you were on a desert island, I suppose, would you rather have a bar of gold or a gallon of water? You probably go for the water. So water in all cultures that I know of has a sacred element if we recognize it. The priest would bless and we would do the sign of the cross. My Jewish friends would have mikvahs or mitzvah.
Mikvah.
That's the
Mikvah.
Yeah. My Muslim friends use water when they pray 5 times a day. I don't know any culture that doesn't acknowledge or recognize water, but we don't see it like this. We don't see it at all. We don't think about it because it comes in, out of the pipe. But if you go 3 blocks away here, you'll find the City of Santa Monica water treatment plant. It's well worth a visit. This produces 56,000 gallons a day. Right here, we measured it. They process 10 million gallons a day. Most of the water that we have in Santa Monica, 75%, comes from the groundwater. They go a little deeper. They have 3 wells. They pump it through a triple osmosis system. But it's interesting that it's still related to this tract of land, which they call the artesian tract because of the presence of the wells. So right from the beginning, they set up the water system here, and they're still pumping water from not far below us, maybe a couple hundred feet down. They're sucking the water out, treating it, and distributing it through the city. I don't know what else I can say about the sanctity of water. We all have our own cultures and impressions and feelings, but if you're here all alone and you connect with the water, then you don't even have to be alone, actually. I don't think it's a personal. Yes.
We can just do maybe one more question. We have to get on the road to our next site, but if we could. Yes.
I have a question, but first I wanted to say something. Natural aquifer, yes, golden, absolutely, and the site is wonderful. What are your thoughts about Tongva Park?
I mean, I wish there were more native plants there. They call it Tongva Park, but I don't see a lot of native plants because they hired these guys from New York They did the High Line, great landscape. $42 million, I suppose, they spent on that. It would be nice to see, but it's a cool place. I mean, I think it's wonderful. And I'm glad they finally acknowledged this idea of Tonga, that we have this connection to the past. For many years I drive down Ocean and I see this sign, Numat Ahiko. And I thought, I've got to be a Japanese businessman that donated, made a bunch of money. I don't know, I'm learning all the time. You know, I wasn't raised speaking this language, not many people were. But I found out recently that Mumat Ahiko is the Tonga word for the breath of the ocean. So it's the onshore breeze, which you can see now, it's starting to come in. Every afternoon, as you know, as Santa Monica residents, Mumat Ahiko comes in from the ocean. So there's a lot of words that are buried, like I said, Topanga, Kalenga, Tahunga. Those are Tonga words. So, yes?
I just wanted to ask you to acknowledge some of the other people in the foundation.
Yes.
I see Morales family members here.
Yeah, I do want to acknowledge Art and Mona. Art Morales is these guys are
Is Angie here as well?
Angie's not here, and we'll talk about that later. But I want to acknowledge and honor Art Morales and his daughter Mona. They're members of the San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians. They represent a continuous lineage from the people that were here thousands of years, and they're here visiting today. And Mona, I think, has a voice on the group here. And thank you all for coming today. Really appreciate it. And do you want to say, is there anything that you want to add to, or correct me in my things?
I do want to add about the idea of this being a sacred land. I think what's important is that this is a known area where we had a village site, and that's something in itself that it's very significant for us, right? And so I think holding space in for that acknowledgement that this was a village site, and we know that obviously because of the water source, and then coming with that perspective of it being a village site, I think I always ask people to take a moment and stop and think about what this area looked like without the buildings, streets, freeways, the school right there, and imagine how beautiful it was. And Bob always shared, about Portola in his journals, but one of the things he shared is that he viewed this area as a paradise with 3 flowing rivers, and I think that it's easy to visualize how this could be perceived as a paradise and why this area was so important for our people. So, and the other thing I want to add is that the way that we lived was in relationship with Mother Earth. So we view plants, animals, wind, fire, all of the elements, water, as a relative. And so the reason that we were able to sustain our life culture for so long is because we lived in relationship with the earth. And knowing that we lived in relationship with the earth, and knowing that we had such a high respect for water, you can visualize and get that whole idea of how we were able to live as long as we did, as well as live off of the earth the way we did. So, thank you.
Thank you. The document, one side has this timeline, sort of like the key things maybe to just sort of, if I was going to pick some highlights of that timeline, is that people have been protesting at this mural since about 2015. Around 2017, the city council first had a motion to we should do something related to this, and they had 5 different initiatives that you could read about to address it in different ways. Then basically very soon after that, the Coastal Commission required the city of Santa Monica and the Arts Commission to figure out some way to deal and interpret with the past of the Belmar site. And so they kind of dropped this project because they only had limited staff capacity, so they put everything back to Belmar, which is the 3rd site that we'll see. And then once that was completed, they kind of reopened this kind of conversation for how we kind of get into it. And that is sort of where our team came in. There's 4 of us with this group, and sort of we're all sort of working under the aegis of Meztli Project, which is a nonprofit that works to kind of expand Indigenous voice, Indigenous creative opportunities. And we're now, basically, this is the first public event of this series. So as I mentioned before, there's 4 kind of parts to our project. The kind of central spine of it, I'd say, is the working circle that we've mentioned many times now. And that's that group that's going to be meeting every couple of weeks for 6 months. Alongside that, there's these public programs that the Working Circle attends, but also we hope is a place for the Working Circle to interact with and connect with other people in Santa Monica who are interested and curious about these things, of which you are, those people. And those will be happening roughly once a month between now and May. And on the city website, which is in the lower right-hand corner, you can get the full schedule and RSVP for any of those events that you're interested in. There's going to be a teacher training on the 22nd, a conversation about memory work across the United States that's going on, like kind of the new approaches to doing memory work and interpretive work. That's going to happen in March. There's going to be kind of a healing story circle in April. And then there's also an event that will be sort of co-designed with the Working Circle that will happen somewhere in there, that we're sort of working with them to figure out what the shape of that should be and what's the right timing and setting and all those things. So that's the second of our 4 prongs. The third prong is this feedback activity that I just gave you, which we're hoping to distribute basically as widely as possible, working with teachers, educators of all kinds, as well as community groups that might have an interest, to just basically fill it out, send it in to us, or drop it at City Hall or at any of Santa Monica's libraries, so we can just canvass as many different ideas as possible, trying to reach as broadly as we can. Some way of people connecting both as a reflection exercise about what they see in the mural, what people see and wish was there that's not there, as well as what other kinds of interpretive or public artworks they might want to see. And then the fourth piece is to doing one-on-one interviews with different folks who are either like content or subject matter experts, or just have a really strong and specific viewpoint that they want to make sure gets recorded. So that's something that this is sort of an opportunity to canvas those. So if you have an idea, you yourself are like, I really have something I really want to say and put it on record, that won't fit into the activities, or you know someone who does, grab one of us, pull us aside and give us their information. We'll try to follow up with them and add that to the record. And all of that work kind of funnels back to the Working Circle that's going to sort of review all these feedback activity exercises, all of those transcripts, and all the public events that they've done, and then kind of use that as the basis of their kind of conversations for what might happen. And all of it will also get collected into the report that comes out sort of in the May, June area. Sorry, I feel like I just like spieled really hard for a long time. But if you have any questions about any of that? Cool, okay. Great. So our next stop is going to be City Hall mural, and is David on the bus? Probably not, because he drove, okay. So I'll introduce David once we're at the site. All right, and yeah, if you are, oh, great. One last thing. We do hope that these events are not just sort of, I mean, there's obviously wonderful experts like Robert, who was able to give us like so much context, but we really do hope that part of it is conversation, and this bus ride provides sort of like a place to have that conversation. So if there's someone here that you don't know, and it might be a nice time to sort of reflect with them. Well, what did you see there? What stuck out to you? Use this as a space to kind of process and think about what we're experiencing. So, thank you. Really just try to share and bring your whole self and your whole thoughts to this. So with that said, I'm going to introduce our, the person who's going to give our keynote, our kind of tour guide for this stop. David Kipen. Some of you may know him from Libros Schmibros, the lending library and bookstore he runs in Boyle Heights. He also teaches at UCLA. He's been a bigwig at the NEA. And the reason why he's here is because he wrote the introductions to the WPA guides to California, and this is a WPA mural. And we thought he could bring a really specific and special context to what was the WPA? How did it create works like this? What were some of the ways that they operated? To give that context. Obviously, there's many people in this room who are maybe more expert in like the specific of Stanton Macdonald-Wright or this process, but we thought that this was a very unique and special context to give, sort of like what created this thing. So without further ado, we're really honored to have David.
Thanks, Ross, and thanks everybody for turning up. It's a real honor to talk to you and to be in here. I am the perfect person to talk to a bunch of people on a tour who are behind schedule, because compared to what Bob Ramirez knows about the Springs, I know a fly speck about what we're about to discuss. And I would love before long for this to turn into as much a conversation as it is any kind of keynote, any kind of, God forbid, lecture. But yeah, I guess I do know a thing or two about the WPA at least. The WPA came about as a result of the Depression when the stock market crashed in 1929, 1 year into the presidency of Herbert Hoover. So he was not reelected in 1932. The man elected was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the nephew of Theodore Roosevelt, who had preceded him and wound up marrying a cousin in the family, Eleanor Roosevelt. But anyway, in 1932, he entered office and did something that is still choking me up right now. Within the first 100 days of his presidency, he passed more legislation than anybody ever had in an entire presidency. He created what's commonly referred to as an alphabet soup of agencies because the acronyms proliferated so thick and fast that nobody could keep track of them. One of them was called the PWA, which was an antecedent of what we're here to talk about, which is the WPA. But they basically, all of them, attempted to do the same thing, which is put out-of-work Americans back to work. The PWA, before long, it was an arts program from coast to coast, as all the projects were, incredibly national. 17,000 sites have been verified across the country of WPA work. And we're talking about not just art. Art was a fraction of it. We're talking about roads and bridges and post offices and schools. And yes, from coast to coast, and I encourage all of you to check out a website called The Living New Deal. This aggregates as much as possible of an ever-growing list of all the things that the WPA accomplished. And many of them are right here in Southern California. I co-produced and hosted a documentary on KPCC a little while, sorry, KCET a little while ago, called A New Deal for Los Angeles. And ultimately it became sort of a rallying cry to bring it back in some form. But it was also an attempt to recognize all that it's done, not just nationally, that was the preamble, but all it's done here. The roads we drive today, many of the schools that we attend today, in part because of the 1933 earthquake, which is commonly thought of as the Long Beach earthquake, but it really smacked Santa Monica around. So many of the schools that we still cherish were built during the WPA. Santa Monica High School, in fact, the curtain at Santa Monica High School was painted on asbestos by a technology that he had to invent by the man who brings us here, for better or worse, Stanton Macdonald-Wright. I'll tell you a little bit about Stanton Macdonald-Wright because I don't know a whole lot. I know him indirectly. I knew about his brother before I knew about him. Because Stanton Macdonald-Wright's brother was a guy named Willard Huntington Wright. They were distant cousins, distant, impoverished cousins of Henry Huntington and Collis Huntington, for whom we have to thank for the Huntington Library. His brother Willard Huntington Wright is better known, if he's known at all nowadays, as a guy named S.S. Van Dyne, who created a private detective named Philo Vance, who's one of the major detective characters of the 1930s. Really interesting family. But to talk about Stanton Macdonald-Wright, maybe I should pass this around. It's on loan, by which I mean I checked it out, from the UCLA library. I teach writing at UCLA. And one thing that you will discover in there and in here, which I'm a little more reluctant to part with, but by all means come up to me and we can chat about it. The first thing you notice looking at Stanton Macdonald-Wright's career is that this bears no resemblance to anything he ever painted when he was not working for the WPA. He had invented something in the 19-teens called synchromism, which was a primarily abstract kind of art. He was in Europe by then. He grew up here. He grew up in Santa Monica, but went to Europe and invented this thing, which was somewhat ahead of its time and lovely to look at unless you read what he wrote about it, which is pretty impenetrable. But his entire career, and I see some people are marveling at it right now, is very abstract, very colorful, and most of it is not even representational at all. So, I mean, let me just jot down, let me just refer to a couple of things. The other thing, and I should cop to this, the thing that I get sentimental about the most in the WPA is the Federal Writers Project. And I won't belabor that because it's not the main reason we're here, but anybody interested in American history should really seek out the American guides, the WPA guides that were created by the Federal Writers Project. There were 4 federal arts projects. One was art, you see that around you. One was music. One was theater. All of these evident in LA at the time, very much so, and can be researched and should still be researched even more deeply. And the Federal Writers Project. They did all kinds of things too. They took down oral histories. Zora Neale Hurston worked for the Federal Writers Project and went into turpentine camps in Florida, recording the firsthand testimonies of elderly people who had been enslaved. But great American writers came out of the Writers Project. Hurston was already famous in the 20s, but she had fallen on hard times in the 30s. But also Ralph Ellison, who wrote Invisible Man, was a trumpeter, not a writer, when he and the project found each other. He was sort of mentored by a guy named Richard Wright, who many of you know as the author of Native Son, who barely had a high school education in Mississippi, went north to Chicago, was mucking out operating rooms when he and the project found each other, and destiny found him, and he went on to one of the careers that changed the course of American literature. John Cheever, Saul Bellow, Studs Terkel got his first microphone working for the Federal Writers Project and basically invented the radio interview, the interview full stop. So the American guides are guides to all 48 states, plus Alaska, plus Puerto Rico, written by 7,000 people, not all of them as talented as the 5 names I've just mentioned, but all of them flat broke when the project came along. And they're marvels. After they did all the ones to states, which were surprise smash hits, the California Guide was a selection of the Book of the Month Club. These were bestsellers. And in fact, so they went back to work and they created this. They created guides to 40 American cities, including San Francisco, which I wrote the introduction for, as I mentioned. These UC Press editions are glorious. By all means, I recommend them. I don't make a nickel off them. It was fee for hire, but they're lovely. Union Station on the cover, which I insisted on because it's prettier than the Terminal Annex, which is what UC wanted to put on the cover. Anyway, Guide to Los Angeles, Guide to San Francisco, Guide to San Diego, Guide to the Monterey County and Death Valley, and yes, Los Angeles. Anyway, controversy is nothing new to the Federal Arts Projects or even the Federal Writers Project. There's a wonderful episode that befell the Massachusetts Guide, which may feel a little bit relevant to what we're talking about today. The WPA Guide to Massachusetts, fascinating work of collaborative literature. Some politicians discovered that it gave more room to the Sacco and Vanzetti case, which was sort of a couple of anarchists were accused of murder, and they became very much taken up as a cause by on the left, not so much on the right. The WPA Guide to Massachusetts gave more space to Sacco and Vanzetti than it did to Plymouth Rock. And this annoyed a lot of people, including the governor. And people demanded that this book be withdrawn from publication, that it be banned. There was a great controversy. Eventually, the book did come out. People sort of made their peace with it, but it created a really fascinating discussion about what is or isn't American history, how much space certain chapters in American history deserve versus other chapters in American history, how to think about and rethink American history. So, I mean, I think these guides are fascinating ways to continue conversations like the ones you guys are here to do. What else can I add? Art critics have much to say about these murals. Historians, activists. I'm fascinated to see what comes of the deliberations that you guys are just embarking on. I'm not an art critic, I'm a lay historian, but as I look up at this, and it's only half of the mural, you see Macdonald-Wright's rather debatable representations of what Santa Monica was like in 1935, 38 when this was painted. But I look at this mural, and the main thing I notice is that none of these people are looking at each other. And I look around me here, and all of you seem, when you're not making a mistake of looking at me or looking up at the murals, you seem to be looking at each other. Everybody on the bus was striking up conversations. And so in that sense, this mural is cautionary. I think more can be accomplished when you guys look to each other and talk to each other. And so far, so good. I wish I could join in and see where all this is going. But thank you all. And if there are any questions, which I will not be shy about admitting I don't know the answers to, if indeed that turns out to be the case, by all means, I'd be happy to entertain them. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, when you started, you used the word impoverished relating to Stanton Macdonald-Wright. I heard that. And you thought, was he not the administrator of the...
Yes, I should have mentioned that earlier.
These, like you said, were people he knew.
Yeah, I mean, the tennis players are tennis players. You know, if you see the chows, the two dogs down here, maybe that's one dog. Two chows in the Santa Monica Public Library mural, which are also, the murals are also Stanton Macdonald-Wright's work. Yeah, he was always incorporating people he knew, some celebrities. You can see film actors on the mural in Santa Monica, in the Santa Monica Library, along with some wonderful art adapted from ancient Japanese art, which he was very well versed in, very devoted to.
So the point is, he was I mean, he was well-to-do. WPA provided.
Yeah. Oh, he was not hired because he was out of work. Okay. He was hired because of his expertise, and in fact was an executive with the Federal Art Project in Los Angeles. He spent more time giving money to impoverished artists. I'm glad you asked this. So that they could paint around town, so that they could create sculpture around town, than he did painting his own stuff. And in fact, if you look back at some of the interviews, he was not the happiest of administrators. He would much rather have been painting his own stuff. He was rather grouchy about it. But yeah, he's one of these guys, you know, like, I don't know, I think back to Edward R. Murrow, who ran Voice of America, who practiced as well as administrated. And that's a tricky combination to navigate sometimes. So in that respect as well, I think he's a guy worth looking back to, although not uncritically. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Lily Contreras, and I'd like to know how long it took him to paint this particular...
I wish I knew. I will defer to anybody who does know, but by way of answer, I know it took him 18 months single-handedly to do the murals in the Santa Monica Library. Yeah, please.
Mm-hmm. To me, it looks like he came back and forth and painted one person and then did another later.
Oh,
and that could possibly be why. And if he does abstract.
Oh, very definitely.
Yeah.
Take a look at the book that's going around. That was his main event.
A lot of people are saying that because they have no eyes, they don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's very hard when you're an artist to draw eyes in a profile.
Yeah, you make a good point. No, you're not. I mean,
that's my grandfather up here, that name, Francisco Marquez, Simon Marquez.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you know, how is Ernie doing?
I haven't talked to him in a while.
Okay. Ernie Marquez, for those of you who don't know, is a descendant, and to shake his hand is to shake hands with 7 generations of Californians. I'm pleased if you see him, give him my best.
I want them to depict this and to give the real history, because some of the dates are wrong.
Really?
Yeah, you need to talk to some of my family, like Terry Delapena.
It's a date. I've got too many business cards in my pocket, and I would love to continue these conversations. But yeah, I mean,
Take that in consideration. That's probably why they're not conversing with each other.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard. It's like in.
It took that long for him to paint it. He's not going to paint everything all at once.
Yeah, and of course it's hard to paint eye contact for the same reason that it's hard to film a conversation without a 2-shot over each other's shoulders.
Well, yeah.
Yes, Ruth Ann.
I just wanted to mention that these are not painted murals.
Oh, yeah.
But the technique used is called petrochrome, and basically it's similar to a terrazzo, where the pigments are ground up and they're incorporated into cement. And then this mural was actually created on the floor, seeing pictures of it being painted, being created, because it's not painted. But the colored pigments, and when you look closer, you see there's variations of the colors. And so this was meant to be part of the wall, the structure basically of the city, and was made to be permanent. The library murals were actually painted with paint on wooden frames so that they could be moved. And they were in fact moved and then brought back to Santa Monica. So I think it's important to understand the technique that we see here.
I'm really grateful for that. He was very much a tinkerer, Stanton Macdonald-Wright. He created a machine for painting that I don't think ever quite worked, but I think deserves a second look, especially in light of recent events with AI and other people's somewhat more successful, although not completely, attempts to create machines for painting. Who else? Yes.
I have two questions. I know you told us what WPA, what the group stood for.
Yeah.
What does WPA actually mean?
Oh, sorry. How did I skip that? It stands for the Works Progress Administration. Which is a rather unwieldy way of saying, giving people work so that they could create progress, and that takes some administrating. Yes?
And then another question is, could you tell us a little bit more about the commission?
I really can't. I bet there are people here who can, but the commission itself is not my area of expertise, and I'm not shy about admitting it. You had a question?
Yeah, I have a two-part question.
Yeah.
How long did the WPA last? What were the years of its operation?
The WPA specifically started in 1935, but its predecessor programs, like I say, were enacted within the first 100 days of Roosevelt's presidency after his inauguration in January of 1933.
And it lasted until when?
Oh, and lasted until, well, let's see. The Writers' Project ended in 1939. It was kind of red-baited out of existence because there were, people thought there were even more communists in it than there actually were. And pretty much the war was the end of the WPA. Absolutely mid to late 30s. Then by 1941 it was gone because it was easy to find jobs with a war on. Yeah?
From time to time you hear about the creation, we had to create a new WPA for our time. It was so successful, so wonderful, that why not have another one? But there's never been anything generated.
Well, there has been federally funded, public works, but no, I should just say parenthetically that ever since an op-ed I wrote 2.5 years ago in the LA Times, I've been engaged in job owning for a 21st Century Federal Writers Project and flying back and forth to Washington. And cross your fingers, there may be more to hear in just a couple of months.
Okay, maybe one more, then we should start.
Yes, ma'am.
So is it safe to say, and it's like a two-part question, is
Sure.
it safe to say that the WPA is like a predecessor of Public Works or like Department of, or like Cultural Affairs even, or something like that?
I mean, there've been public works ever since the Romans built aqueducts and before. But the Federal Art Project in 1930, starting in 1935, there was no real predecessor to that. There was no National Endowment for the Arts, where I used to work as the literature director until the 1960s. It's kind of axiomatic that other countries give more money to the arts, that we give more money to military bands than other countries give to, have I got this right? Other countries give more money to the arts than we give to, I can't seem to make this make sense, can I? Basically, we spend a pittance compared to other countries, and we spend more on military bands than we do on art. There, I got it.
That's actually a really great point to know. And as an urban planner, like one of the things that I've been fascinated about is the role of African American, Indigenous, Chicano, Asian American peoples in public administrative offices.
Yeah.
Whether the role of actually being considered as architects, painters, decision makers on commissions. What year were people of color
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, forgive me if, because the Writers' Project is what I know the most about, I answer it in terms of the Writers' Project, though I dare say it's true, because, you know, these were people who were doing their best in the 1930s to be enlightened, which is not what our best would be thought of today. Yeah, very much pre-civil rights. In the Writers' Project, sure, people of color were vastly underrepresented, but if we think about its legacy to American literature, people of color, you could almost say, were overrepresented. I mean, Zora Neale Hurston, Ralph Ellison, Richard Wright, I mean, you know, the ones that were there accomplished a lot more in terms of posterity than the ones who were not people of color. So, you know, they made their presence matter for a lot.
And then my last question, was there ever any Tongva or any of the local indigenous peoples that were employed by the, what's the acronym?
The Federal Art Project.
Works Progress Administration?
Yeah, the Works Progress Administration, and under that, the Federal Art Project. I don't know. I would love to believe that there were. Maybe somebody else does.
Thank you.
But let me know if you find out, okay?
You too. Let me know if you find out.
It's a deal.
I just want to say that I recently read that there were many depictions of indigenous people in WPA arts, and a small percentage of them were in fact created by indigenous people. So yes, there were a few.
Sounds like there's some research to be done out there.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And thank you, David,
Oh.
so much for fielding all this. So we're now going to move to the Belmar project. I want to announce. Oh, hold on, just 1 second. There's no bathrooms there, and the tour will end there. So I just want people to know that there are restrooms down this hallway. And when we do leave, we're going to exit out this way and then to the left.
I just have Mike. There we go. Go ahead and present it as we go. This is a letter from my cousin, who's the tribal chairman of the Gabrielino Shoshone. He wanted you guys to hear this.
To the city leadership of Santa Monica, it comes to our attention that the controversial mural is going to be once again displayed in City Hall due to the pressure by those ignorant of our people's painful past history. Ironically, the image portrayed is not one of historical accounts, but instead of artist's conception based on which we know now, as well as the state of California, as poorly educated facts. Conception is just that, an idea that is left to the interpretation of those who view it. So let me tell you how it is perceived and interpreted by those descendants whose ancestors were held in captivity at the supposed era this image depicts. You may see my ancestors drinking water. We see slaves granted a drink while under guard. And some of us see slaves being used for a water contamination test. We also notice a sword of the mounted conquistador pointed directly at the neck of the native he condescendingly sits above. For it was those swords that struck down many of my ancestors who were unwilling to worship an immigrant religion. You leaders need to ask yourself, what if one is to replace the natives with black men and Hunipesera with a slave owner? Would it still be appropriate? Because it brings the same content to our minds as it would a black man if he were to see that imagery in a place where all men are supposed to be considered equal. Or if you can imagine the Spaniard soldiers replaced with any other military that had history with the natives here, and it would still be of negative connotation at any historical level. We ask you to please reconsider your intentions to display this mural and have the common decency to think of those who this image offends and help us move forward, not backwards, and ultimately remove it from your building permanently. Respectfully, Nicholas Rocha, Chairman of the Gabrielino Shoshone Tribal Council.
Thank you. Thanks. So, are we ushering this way?
Phase one now. We're in our community listening and sharing phase, and good to go. Take it away, Kathleen.
Awesome. So my name's Kathleen Benjamin. I've been in the city of Santa Monica for 60 years, even though I don't look it, right? And so Robbie and I went to school together all through the years, and when we opened this project, I was standing here, we're looking at that, we're looking at the people who have been misplaced, destroyed, eliminated, and thinking, what an amazing world. I have some pictures I'm going to pass around. Back in the day, I was full service catering, chef staffing to the stars. And so I've been riding in limousines in and out of the Civic Auditorium, had no idea. We used to go to Don Kirshner concerts for free. We'd seen every act in the world at the Civic Auditorium. What a blessing. And so I'd like to just have a moment of silence for the people that have been eliminated, transferred from here. Thank you. And so what I love about this project is the amount of community input. That's why I asked about the hours, because it was crazy. It was crazy and totally unbelievable. In the time capsule, there are 72 pieces of information that were brought together by us and just going out into the community so that when they open that in 50 years, they'll actually have an understanding of what we were about. So when we think about Black and brown people in the city of Santa Monica and how we've been erased in regards to the contribution, I love that the name of this is A Resurrection in 4 stanzas. I love that April was so amazing in her listening. So one of the things that we had in one of those mini conversations in one of those mini hours was the fact that in the shotgun houses and the people that lived here, the homes were built like this, and that people would gather, which Robbie will tell you about her movie that she has, When We Gather, that they gathered on the front porch at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, on Sundays, and how this is a place for that. That's why the headstone is at the threshold. And also, we get to look at the life, what it would be like to be in a house right here. One of the projects that was amazing is one of the ones that was at the high school, where the high school students were able to create their concept of what the city would be like had that whole community not been eliminated, from businesses to communities and that. So my family came here in 1949, and leaving Jim Crow, Mobile, Alabama, to work at UCLA. And so my grandfather came in to start working, brought the rest of the family in, and began to buy property, which we still own, and living and loving beautiful Santa Monica. And I'll pass it over to you, Robbie. So I'll pass these around.
Do I need, wait. I do need a mic.
So this picture here
I do need
is
a
from
mic.
1949 when we first came here. This is my grandmother. She was the oldest person in the city of Santa Monica. She lived to be 106. This is me at the mural that Danny Alonzo made. And this is one of those Civic Center party nights. Oh, you need that?
I guess I do. Yeah, I shouldn't. Yeah, I think this is for the camera. So, actually, most everything has already been said, guys. I'll just introduce myself, Robbie Jones. I was born and raised here. As Kathleen said, we both went to Santa Monica High School. My kids went to Santa Monica High School. My husband of 36 years that passed away went to Santa Monica High School. My uncles went to Santa Monica High School. So a lot of Santa Monicans in my family. My family came here in the 30s. They left and went back to Magnolia, Arkansas. My grandfather passed away, and then they came back and buckled down here, and not here in Belmar, but in Santa Monica, Los Angeles. And then I was born in the 50s. 57 to be exact, 1957. And so I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen a lot of growth in some areas, but I'm an activist. So I'm making things happen as well. My voice matters. That's right, girl. So that is a part of my life that I really, really love and treasure. I like bringing a voice to people who have basically been voiceless and been erased and aren't here. So that was what was so special about doing this project. I knew that my grandmother, when I used to, sit around the house with her and her friends as they cooked these wonderful meals, and they would talk about Belmar, and some of the people may have even lived here. I know she had a few friends that did, But I never gave it that much thought until I was asked to come and be a part of this project. And then I was like, oh my God. It just came to life. And it was very painful working through it. Actually growing up here and knowing that you knew these people. And I know that most people from Santa Monica that lived here, once it was, they had to leave, they went to Venice, Los Angeles, Inglewood, they went all around. And so we've got family, in the surrounding areas, but we always make, kind of joke about if you were from Santa Monica, you got family in Venice. And so then an organization was created, Venice Santa Monica Reunion. And they created that organization to see each other in a more positive, fun way at dances and barbecues rather than at funerals. And so that, it just all tied in together. So, back to this project, when I come to this area, and I come often because I do something called Black Santa Monica Tours. I do tours of the Black history because when I sat with my grandmother learning the history, the more I learned, the older I got, the more I learned, I wanted to share it with others. And so my grandmother was like, put something together for the family. They're coming for the family reunion. We need to shine. And so I put a little bit of the history together, and we went on a bus. The family went on the bus. Of course, I had to take the kids to the pier. Didn't want to make it totally boring for them. And so we went to the pier, but we came back to a local church, First AME Church, where I grew up. My grandmother raised me there. And we took histories of our family. And we had a historian come in, Mr. Aaron Day, who talked about how important it was to know your history. And he had the family members start on writing their history. And we had Carolyn Edwards that made us some cute little forms that were so elementary with the little family tree that it would make it easy for everybody to do. And so from that, all my friends, they wanted me to do something for their family reunion, so on and so on. Thus, Black Santa Monica Tours. I love to do it. I love bringing people, particularly here, because I actually feel like I still feel the spirit of the people here, and it gets kind of emotional for me sometimes. But as I walk them through, because my family is from the South, recognize these shotgun houses for sure. This is just kind of a, shell of it. And when April was doing it, I remember thinking, what the heck? That don't look like a house to me, know nothing about architecture. And so I didn't understand how it would all come together. And when, as Kathy said, we unveiled it, and Kathleen and I, we have pictures, I should have brought those pictures, of us peeking out beyond the trees and just doing silly stuff here. But this was a very emotional moment when we unveiled this. This is a piece of our history that was meant for harm, but now I see it as a place of beauty. And it is the same as Inkwell was the same thing, and a lot of other places that are still here in Santa Monica and some that aren't here. But when I think about the people that sat on their porch and waved to everybody, because I remember when I went to Mississippi with my husband, I used to say, why are those people waving at us every block we turn, every dirt road? And that's just what people did in the South. And as they sat on the bench and drank their sweet tea, and, they just loved everybody. And they're just waving whether they knew you or not. And, that's how my grandmother was. She was a strong Black woman. She was kind of firm, especially on me. But she knew what kind of world we were growing up in. But she loved family. And so, that's what I recall. But when I walk, especially particular students that I do often, I bring them here and talk about the time capsule and talk about what, in 2070, maybe your grandkids will be here. I probably won't be here. Let's hope I'm not. But but I, talk about, please look in there because I wrote something that's in there. And then tell my great-grandkids. And then I walk over and I see, I always ask the kids, what do you think this is on the side? And, some of them get it, some of them don't. But I love the ones that get it right away. They say, those are flames. wow, they're smart. And who knows what flames and, mean to black people, especially coming from the South. And broken glass. And then we walk under the thresholds, and of course we read the wording, but from Maya Angelou and some from April herself, who is just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person. I can't say enough about April. But we go over to the window, and I think about the kids that must have sat in that window and looked out at their friends once it's time to come inside. But just even looking as people started to move out and have to move away and give up their homes. I thought about that, Kathy. I thought when we were at Samuel High, oh my God, if we had to move, because Kathy and I live walking distance from each other and from each other's homes, and if we had to just uproot and go, that would have been tragic. And I can only imagine what these young children must have felt sitting in those windows as I see the kids play on this multi-purpose field. I mean, it's just all kind of emotions. So, basically, this project meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to my community, so I gave it my best. It was a lot of work. I don't know how many hours. I know it was a lot of hours.
Oh, wait, I have an interjection, though.
No interjection.
I would be surprised if the working circle can accomplish what we did. I challenge you to be that efficient and that open-hearted to really hear what people are wanting to express. It's deep if you're really willing to listen. And it might get messy. But if you're willing to really listen, hear, record, take it in, then you might be able to have something, because a lot of information is poured into both of us throughout the years for our lives, and that we respect and love what this represents. So, and that's exactly what that mural is going to take, maybe even more. So I challenge you, and I'm part of it. Sorry about that.
She's not sorry. She always tries to upstage me. But no, Kathy's right. You guys, that is a challenge. To be able to do that. We didn't always get along, but we respected one another and each other's opinion and views, and we, like she said, we took it in. I learned so much doing this project, not only about the history, but just about myself, and how I could work on a project like this, even in pain, but just make sure I got the work done, because it meant a lot to the community. Make sure that I got it right. Make sure that it showed what happened to the people here, and I just think that I know that the processes are kind of sometimes boring, sometimes emotional, sometimes a lot of different things, but you can do it. You have to, because you have to always think, as I was telling Stephanie on the way over here, just do the work. Just do the work, and then it'll all, like I said, I had no idea what this was going to look like or what it was going to be. I couldn't even imagine panels. What is that? What does that mean? Okay, but now, to have those panels, I want them all over the city now. I want them to be there because when you walk around, you learn the history of this community and a little bit of the outside community. It's all about, Mr. Lloyd Allen and people that are still here that I know, that I've always admired, and they're on these panels and they're telling their stories. And so I know that you guys can do this. I don't know if I'll be actually a physical part because I'm all over the place, but I just know that it can happen, and I'm really depending on you as a Santa Monican.
That's right.
To make this right.
Your job.
To make it right, to rewrite or write or add to the history, however you choose to do it, and working with the working group that you work with, you just learn how to, I think we ate through it a little bit, and we drank tea or we had our cups, and we just kept boggling down and getting it done. And so that's what you have to do when you're on something like this. It's really not about the fight. It's really not about personalities. It's really not about a lot of that superficial stuff. It's really about, and do understand though, you still have to understand that there is trauma, there is hurt there, but you have to work through it. And so I'm so proud of us because we got through it.
I want to mention.
But wait. We had a wonderful team staff that worked with us. Our city staff, Naomi, was amazing. And Shannon Dow, who we're losing, she's leaving, but she was just everything that I've never worked with anybody like that before. So, they were just our photographers, Jordan, and all of our everybody, our team just came together, and they still keep in touch. That's what lets you know how great it was. When you have people that still keep in touch after a project is done, that means you've done well. So, my hat's off. Come on, do it for Santa Monica, do it for me. I don't want to be a little selfish. And what else did you want to say, Kathy?
Well, what I wanted to say was that a lot of things have been inspired from this project. A lot of community projects, a lot of other art, and also a movie that someone that's standing near me is in that I'd like her to mention.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the movie. But before I do that, I want you to do it for these people. This is a march that happened in the 60s, right along that sidewalk on Pico. I'm going to pass it around and make sure I get it back. But yeah, just know some of the things that happen here, and those people, how proud they would be, because our city is just 8 square point whatever miles. We're a small city. We can do stuff that other cities cannot do.
That's right, that's for sure.
And we can do them more efficient and quickly, and we need to just do it. But when I look at that picture, when I think about this Belmar history, anything can be done. Anything can be done. So the movie, okay.
We Gather
is the movie. It's just a short pictorial. Another project. I had no idea what this was going to look like. Orchestra Santa Monica said, we need you to tell some of the history of Santa Monica, and we need you to, put us in touch with people that have pictures, and we want to do this movie. And, that was kind of after weeks they came up with that part, because truly they didn't kind of have an idea what how it was going to come together either. But I thought, okay, music, history, I'm trying to get it. You have to see this pictorial. It tells the history, and it's just the beginning as well. It tells the history, a little bit of the history of Black Santa Monicans. People were so gracious, but a lot of people weren't willing to give up their pictures. Your history is very personal to you. So it's very hard to hand over your pictures and different things. I know every time someone passes away in my family, a picture comes up missing from the album. So I'm so grateful for digital now, because we have a lot of empty spots where people want to take pictures that they like, not realizing that's personal to you. But it's a pictorial, and the only sound, physical voice sound, is me. And I'm down at the inkwell, walking on the beach, and it was funny because the photographer kept shooting my feet. And I'm like, what's wrong with him? Is he kind of strange? Why are you shooting? And then I thought, I got vain. I said, at least I had a pedicure. And so I couldn't understand why he kept shooting my feet. But now that I see the movie, I'm walking on the beach telling the story and telling how I remember running down to the ocean as a little girl, couldn't wait to get out of my uncle's car with all my cousins and going to what I did not know at the time when I was a little girl was a segregated beach. And all I remember my grandmother saying with her friends, don't go too far, don't go too far. And you think that with parents and grandparents, they just don't want you to go too far. They don't want you to get in trouble. But no, they were concerned about the harm that could come to us from going further than what they could see. And we always looked at, now as an adult, I can see the concern on their face because they had no idea what might happen. When I think of Bruce's Beach, I know Now I absolutely know what they were thinking. But as a little girl, you think of all the peach cobbler, all the food that's on the table when you finish playing. You're going to be able, because our community kept us safe.
That's right.
They kept us kind of blocked away from a lot of racism, a lot of hatred, a lot of things. And so we didn't really recognize, and I didn't recognize until I started digging into the history myself, until I started learning. But see, we gather tonight. Orchestra Santa Monica is having an event. I don't know if I can say that. You can cut it out if I can't. And they, I don't believe it's sold out. No, she said it's sold out. Well, why did you have it? Okay, it is sold out, but they are having an event with the world-renowned baritonist who we also went to school with, Jubilant Sykes. He's going to be singing with Orchestra Santa Monica because Derek Sky, the composer, composed the music specifically for this project for the Black community, and it's just an honor to just even be a part of it. So that's all I want to say. It's also online. You can see, if you look online, We Gather. It's a short 15 minutes, very moving, very touching, and only the beginning. So there you go.
I think we have time for maybe a few questions. I know we said we'd keep you till 1, so we're close to that, and I would love to, for those who are hungry for it, which is many of you maybe, to stick around. We can have some conversation, share some reflections. But let's do a few questions for this project in particular. I think I see 1, 2, 3, and then we'll kind of move into the more casual conversation piece.
I just wanted to say that there's an exhibit that has been extended at the Santa Monica History Museum.
Broadway?
About, yes. So it's
Say
nice,
that.
it's a good exhibit.
It's
You
Broadway,
know more
if
than
people
me.
didn't hear it.
Okay, well, there is another exhibit. Carolyn Edwards championed that one. That is my fellow local historian. My grandmother and her family were very close. And Carolyn is also my sorority sister. We belong to the Philomathian Charity Club, Inc., which gives over $70,000 worth of scholarships to Santa Monica High School. And it is the Quinn Research Center that she founded in honor of her uncle, Dr. Alfred Quinn, who was an icon here. He was one of my favorites. But the Broadway district is an area where our Black community had most of their businesses at one time. And so we're kind of trying to not only memorialize, but make the history of that, as well as bring some businesses back. But one business, well, several businesses, but on the corner of that Broadway district is the Philomathian Charity Club owns the building, and they own the beauty shop, the barber shop, where it houses a beauty shop, barber shop, and a school. The school used to be their clubhouse. Of course, they couldn't do what they do now, which is go around to restaurants and meet and eat. They couldn't do that. So they established in the 20s their own clubhouse, and they owned that property when it was not popular nor easy for Black people to own property. They did it, and it just, I'm not going to go on about how they did it, but do check on the Philomathian history. Nina could probably help you with that. She's done quite a bit of research in history with the Philomathian, and it's an honor to be a Philomathian. My grandmother brought me in, so it's a club, so yeah.
Other questions?
2 more.
Okay.
And maybe do you want to ask
Oh.
them in sequence, and then we can...
Here, you want to take care of the mic, and
yeah.
so I don't get beat up. I don't know who was first. Okay.
I think April Banks' art installation is amazing and it's beautiful. And I just was curious, was she also responsible for the time capsule?
It was a whole group project, I think, but Naomi.
Yeah.
But it was April's. Yeah, she is amazing. I had to accept when she finished this project, she was getting so many awards that she asked me to go and accept an award for her, and I was just beaming. And anyway.
She has a sacred list.
She's amazing. Look at her website, April Banks. One of the special things that we did a little bit of, but April was really big on this because she's done it for before, called Teas from Afar. But she customized it for Santa Monica, and we had like a tea. And everybody, we ate certain foods pertinent to the African American community, but everybody told their story about these foods and just about whatever they wanted to talk about. And it really kind of brought community together. So you might want to consider something like that as well. Oh, where's my, oh, there you are.
A quick question, and I wanted to know if you're going to do anything about Dr. Tucker. Because he delivered my uncle. I have pictures of my uncle. I think I spoke with Carolyn. That's why I asked if you knew Tyree Hunter, but she goes by Warren, the Warrens, or the Fritz family. Yeah,
do know the
and he
Fritz
also
family.
delivered a very well-known Congo woman here.
Okay.
Here you go.
So there were a couple of different midwives that were here. Dr. Tucker was actually a doctor, but there were some other midwives, and I get that question all the time. But yes, I wanted them to landmark the Tucker home. We always call that house, because I lived in that community. Kathy lived a little bit further west, but I lived in that community, and every time we walked around that house, we called it the mansion, because it was the biggest house on the block, and we thought it was so beautiful. It was the only big house on the block. But I'm going to tell you a little secret that I was told from Mrs. Tucker, her daughter-in-law, Indira Tucker, before her passing. She told me that Paul R. Williams, architect, actually helped design parts of that house. And he made her swear to not tell anybody so that he wouldn't, But he did design some of that. And at the time that I heard about it, he was one of my heartthrobs. I loved him and his whole history. So yes, we hope to do some more about the Tucker. No, I'm not. I'm not that old, but.
And there is one of the signs around the park.
One of the banners.
Oh, there is.
I just have one more quick question. Robbie, I noticed you use the term the inkwell. I've become uncomfortable using that term. Can you talk to me about if I can use that term or only you can use that term?
That's a good question.
I find that odd that you're asking, can you use the term? I mean, we publicly put it on the actual monument because the beach was a segregated beach. It was given a lot of names by people who were not black, but it was also given names by black people that we, in term of endearment to each other, but we would never, other people could not call those names. So when it comes to the inkwell, that is the name that was created because, the color of ink is black generally. But I think it goes by the generation, because I know Carolyn Edwards and I go back on this a couple of times. We always go back on it. Her generation wants to call it Bay Street Beach. My generation, my kids' generation, my family's generation love the inkwell. And we love that partially. I can't say Martha's Vineyard didn't have anything to do with it, and Obama and the movie with Jada Pinkett, Jada Pinkett Smith and Janet Jackson, all them. So the inkwell, yes, Stephanie, the answer to your question, yes, that is what the landmark calls it, the inkwell. And I have no problem of you or anyone calling it the inkwell. I look at it as well. On the monument, it says a place of celebration and pain. So there's a lot of history with that, as I described some of it already. But I look at it as a place of celebration now. And so the inkwell, it's my inkwell. It's our inkwell. It's our inkwell.
Yeah, now that you know the history, you can share it. If anybody has anything to say, you can say, hey, let me tell you this about it.
it's our inkwell.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation and thanks for all the great questions. We're going to wrap for today. In closing, I just want to remind folks of the two questions we asked you to think about for today. The first one was, how do these different sites hold collective memory? What ways do they do that? We've been in very different locations with very different histories and seen very different things in our natural environment. So be thinking about that. And then especially for our working group members, also, what did you hear today that sparks you? What are things that you heard that you want to share back with the group and perspectives other than your own that you want to kind of mark or track? So please make note of those, and we'll be talking about those at our next meeting, which is on Wednesday, as you all know. And you also have the feedback activity guide. Please take some time to think about it, fill it out. You can drop it off to us at the library. It's also online, so you can fill it out online and send it back. Please share this with people you know so that we can collect as many responses as possible from folks in Santa Monica and elsewhere. Anyone who wants to engage in the process can through this or all the other public all the P's, all the public programs that we're going to be having. Please spread the word. The recommendations we make to the city will be much more rich with more and more voices and as many diverse voices as we can. So thank you again for coming out, and we'll be here for questions. And I think, you have something?
Yeah, I mean, can I just say one more thing
Yes.
about the, please take these are coloring books. These coloring books that April made with her partner are wonderful, and they're a wonderful teaching tool. Grown-up coloring with the pencils, even though I still color with crayons, but it's great for the kids, and I plan on using them to teach some of our elementary school children the history of Black Santa Monica. Please do that.
Thanks so much. And I know we've kind of been like rushing us along this whole time, but now we're done with our program, so we can really have as much conversation as people are up for. Those who have to go, by all means, you are released. But for those who want to continue talking about all these histories, I'm here. We're here for as long as we can.